Hey, it's Dick Boy from the Gaming Anti-Collective, and we've got a lot to get through today. Primarily, I'd just like to say I'm very amused to see that Leland Yee, after the massive backlash he received from his stupid comments, has basically gone back on himself, yet at the same time maintained his stupid posture. He's come back with saying, no, I wasn't attacking gamers, I was just saying self-interest. Well, Senator Yee, I truly hope you see my video, my previous video, where I tell you exactly how you're a ridiculous hypocrite for even having that point of view, because you have acted out of self-interest. We all act out of self-interest. Calling self-interest on an issue like this is ridiculous. However, I'm afraid Leland Yee is not alone in this situation, and if you're concerned, if you're an American, you're politically active, and you think that perhaps it's particularly a Republican or particularly a Democrat issue, because depending on your political viewpoint, you might think that perhaps the Democrats are being too much into the nanny state and they'll try and control everything. Whereas if you don't like the Republicans, you may think that they're just ignorant bigots who are going to shut everything down they don't like. Now, there's a bit of an issue, really, because we've got a lot of senators now just leaping all over this for their own soapbox to make their own point. An example here is Lamar Alexander, who's a Republican senator from Tennessee. Just read you here. They were asking questions about whether it's appropriate to have universal background checks for guns. Now, I don't know what your personal views are on gun ownership. However, I think you'd be fairly hard-line to believe that checking somebody before you sell them a gun, giving them a background check before you sell them a gun, is not a sensible option. It sounds to me like a very sensible option. But when asked that question, did he, rather than actually addressing the situation and addressing responsible gun ownership and how that should be managed, his response was, I'm going to wait and see on all of these bills. I think video games is a bigger problem than guns because video games affect people. But the Second Amendment limits what we can do about video games, and the Second Amendment of the First Amendment, limits what we can do about video games, and the Second Amendment to the Constitution limits what we can do about guns. Now, the second part of that statement is very true. There is, in the US, you have, enshrined in your constitution, free speech and the right to bear arms, and that's where this debate should be held about where the limits of that statute should be in place. That's where they should be. But why? Apropos of nothing. That's like saying, how do you feel about badgers? Do you think we should stop badgers being set on fire? And then you responding by going, yeah, I'm going to wait on that. Incidentally, I really, really hate cats. Where's that come from? Why have you just... Your logical... shows that your brain is so illogical that you associate gun violence with video games and not guns, primarily. I don't see where you get that from. Where you seem to think... If you think you can blame video games, but you can't blame guns... Still, I'm afraid he's not alone. Chris Murphy, the Connecticut Democratic senator, so, I mean, he does have a vested interest to speak out on this matter. What with him... Newton obviously being very much in his area. He said, I think there's a question as to whether we should be driven, whether he would have driven his mother's car in the first place if he didn't have access to a weapon that he saw in video games. That gave him a full sense of courage to what he could do that day. I'll read that through to you again, slowly, okay? See if you can see where his logic train just derails. I think there's a problem as to whether he would have driven in his mother's car in the first place if he didn't have access to a weapon that he saw in video games that gave him a full sense of courage about what he could do that day. Let's reread that sentence, removing what I think is a completely irrelevant point, and let's see how it plays out. I think there's a question as to whether he would have driven his mother's car in the first place if he didn't have access to a weapon that gave him a full sense of courage about what he could do that day. He felt like he could kill somebody because he had a gun to do it. Now, whether guns should be available or not is a different matter. The gun is what gave him the full sense of courage. He wasn't there's no evidence he was desensitised to violence by video games. The fact is he got hold of his mother's weaponry and shot children, and his mum, and a couple of other adults. Where are you getting this link from? There's no evidence he was even obsessive about video games, or that he'd been desensitised to them, or that he was over the top in his admiration of violent games. Dynasty Warriors. Dynasty Warriors. Really? Really? That's like saying the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles turned him into an assassin. Where are you coming from? So I'm afraid if you're particularly a party political person, I tend to personally keep my politics personal and not latch onto a specific party. I'll agree with something a member of a party will say, but whether I agree with a whole policy, because I think there's too much. You've got to be pragmatic and sit on the fence to come to the right conclusion in any argument. You've always got to see it from the other side. And just saying this is right and that is wrong doesn't really get us anywhere. So in light of not everybody being able to do that, it makes sense to have people with one extreme view and another extreme view argue over it. But maybe the best option is we can actually just discuss it like rational, sensible adults, which is what these people aren't doing. They're seeking a scapegoat. But rejoice, gamers, rejoice. Because, oh dear God, John Riccitiello from EA, the CEO of EA, has decided that he is going to defend, he wants to defend video games because of their bad perception. Okay, John, if you see this, keep your nose out. He's doing the right thing. He is doing the right thing by speaking out and defending video games, because there is a poor perception of video games. The problem is that you, as the CEO of EA, are one of the worst people to speak out about this. Granted, you're not, unfortunately, Rockstar are always going to be the company that take the biggest bashing with regards to videos, because they have Grand Theft Auto, and with Grand Theft Auto coming out, which I'm going to cover in a second, you really need to, you know, they're in the fairly safe zone. They're known for FIFA. They're not known for publishing Shadows of the Damned. They're not known for publishing that. People don't tend to remember the extreme stuff that's in the EA catalogue. They remember their sports franchises, and they know that they have Mass Effect, and they know that they now have Dragon Age and things like that. Not technically the big time gun. They ignore Battlefield. No one mentions Battlefield, interestingly. It was all about Call of Duty desensitising you to violence, whereas Battlefield, which arguably is a more of an actual, I would actually say it's more of a realistic simulator than COD. COD's a bit more of a cartoony Michael Bay impression, whereas, you know, Battlefield feels a bit more like it's trying to feel more genuine. So, but you know, he is talking out of self-interest, Senator Yee, before you shoot him down for having to speak. The problem is that this guy has no credibility to have this conversation. If you're unaware of his track record, I mean, he's the CEO of EA, okay, so that should be enough. However, there are two particularly interesting points that you should really bear in mind, and that we should really distance ourselves as gamers from certain spokespeople who are trying to speak out, because this, in essence, is like essentially a bunch of people who sell bacon looking to a Nazi to help promote their product. We don't need him to defend our reputation. Okay, this is the man who is in charge of the company. And he's captured on footage, and I'll put the link in the info bar, about him talking about microtransactions and how great it is to suck people in and then start charging them for reloading, for ammo clips. Saying how great it is because the cost of goods are so low and they can get people invested in the game, get them addicted. Do you know who talks like this? Give them a little bit for free, get them interested, get them addicted, and when they're desperate, that's when you charge them. That is the business acumen of a drug dealer. That is how crack dealing makes so much damn money. You come at them softly, you offer them, you know, if they come for you something, you get something, and then it blows out of proportion and you'll start taking advantage. That's what he's doing. This is also the man talking about the perception of video games. If you haven't seen it, I strongly recommend, and again I'll link it down in the info bar, I strongly recommend you check out the trailer for Dead Space 2, where they got a load of people's mums, a lot of sort of middle-aged old women, and sat them down and played them Dead Space 3 and showed them going, oh, this is, why would you make a game like that, and this is dreadful, and oh, I think this would make someone insane, and then go, I can't the word, I'll paraphrase and do the whole, it's brutal, it's disgusting, it's everything you want in a video game and your mom will hate it. That is, if nothing, an advertisement towards children. And it also takes away the point that what you were meant to be selling was a horror product that is meant to appeal to people who do go like, if you did that whole thing, it just said, you're in space, necromorphs are gonna eat your face, run from the evil demon babies. That's better than, I've shown your mom and she threw up into a bucket. What are you doing? What are you doing? That is sensationalising your product. That's not advertising it. That's directly sensationalising it. John, you are absolutely the person who is one of the main people who is to blame for the perception of video games. Because when it comes to games like Grand Theft Auto, Rockstar don't come out and say stupid shit or do horrible things. They have their product, people attack it, they don't defend it as vehemently as they should do, but they don't drop themselves in it. They just produce their product and people judge it. You've been exposed so many times for just being a greedy douchebag. You are the last person we need to talk about this. You know, do everyone a favour. Just retire, take your massive severance package and piss off and take your money and build your fucking Death Star or whatever it is that makes you interested. Because you're not a business leader, you're a Sith Lord and it's freaky. Anyway, leading me on from mentioning Grand Theft Auto. Grand Theft Auto 5 has been put back to September. Now, a lot of people are very upset about this. I think that it's genius, and I like it in two ways. I like the fact that they put this back. One, they've been sensible, and they haven't released the game. They could just be pushing the release back because they don't want to dropping a game that is, potentially, everyone still talks about Grand Theft Auto. Everyone does. It's the game when it comes to the sick and disgusting thing in video games, and because it's a real life, it's based in a reality, and it's you committing crimes in what appears to be a more realistic world. It's not fantasy violence, but it is obviously it's a fantasy world, but it's more like an action film. It's more like, you know, and this new one looks like it's going to be like looks like it's going to be like, you know, somewhere mixed between like Heat and something that's going to be quite that kind of like a really gritty game. We'll see what happens when it comes out. But there's two reasons I'm happy. One, they might be trying to avoid the current shitstorm in the media. Because can you imagine what would happen if GTA dropped this week? Do you know how big a deal that would be? How big a problem it would be? How many protests? And do you know what? They're not EA. They're not milking the notoriety. They may well be going, do you know what? Maybe it's sensible to put this back by 6 months. Or 4 or 5 months. And just let this die down a bit before we release our product. Because if you want to release a product that is based on... Because if Call of Duty came out this week, damn right they'd put it back. Damn right they would. Activision aren't so stupid as to do that. They might be dicks in a lot of ways, but they're not stupid. You cannot release a game like that in this current climate. They've made the right decision. The second option is, as I've mentioned this before, the game might not be ready. I want the game to be ready. The GTA games, 4 was a bit hit and miss for me, but the previous games I've had, 1, 2, 3, Vice City, San Andreas and 4, other than 4, which was a little bit of a step backwards, just an increase in the graphics engine to me, and a few bits and pieces, but I preferred San Andreas. I think is generally considered the ultimate GTA game. And I'm hoping to see that this game is going to top that as one of the best games of all time. It could well be one of the best games ever. That's a subjective point, but I like the Grand Theft Auto series, so it could be awesome. They might have problems with it. Do you really want it to be patched day one? Do you want it to be broken like Skyrim? Is that what you want? Or do you want a finished product to be released at a time and place where you're not going to be quite as harassed for even buying it? Because you guarantee if they released it, if they were going to release it in March, they would have religious groups and right parent groups and all these people attacking them left, right, and there'll be protests and there'll be a nightmare. Maybe this is a really clever call. Maybe they're not just pissing off the case. And you know what? Their shareholders are idiots because their shares got hit quite substantially for doing this. Video game shareholders, you need to realise that a good quality product is better than a quick launch. Ignore EA. Ignore these companies that just shove the products onto the market as soon as they possibly can. And you know, Capcom and EA and all these companies that are the worst for it. And they put these products out and then they have to do massive updates. And then the product's reputation goes into the toilet. The sales are damaged long term because the game is known to be broken. Because the reviews are based on the pre-patched edition. If you release this game now and you write a reviewers, and I've got a lot of time for reviewers, but if you take stock in reviews, they're always going to be picking up things price release because they've got it before day one. They're basing it based on a pre-day one build. If it's patched on day one, it's not the complete game, and they're going to criticise it more. Your product is going to have a more negative impression. If you're going to invest money in this sort of business model, you need to understand how your returns work. If GTA 5 is perfect in every way, it is going to sell more copies than if you shove it out onto the market with massive problems that you then have to backpedal and fix. This is the problem with the industry being with most of these companies being publicly floated. They rely on people who want short-term goals and immediate profits, and they're not interested in the longevity of the business model. That is what is entirely why you have peaks and dips in the economic system. Because people who are investing are only financially invested. They're not invested in a way that they want the business to succeed. They just want to make their money. And that is a problem. It can work out really well. It can be a huge issue. Right, speaking of Skyrim, leading into that nicely, finally, the PS3 version of Skyrim, there's a release date. There's going to be all the updates that we've been waiting for absolutely forever, and they're finally releasing them on the PS3. I'm glad they didn't hold off to a Game of the Year edition to release this. I'm glad they did. And if it's reasonably priced, I'm hoping that they're going to take a little bit of a loss on the price. I know they've had to do a lot of work on there, but I'm hoping they're going to work out cheaper than the Xbox downloads, ideally for me, and then I'll be considered to support it, because I haven't picked Skyrim up in well over a year. Because it's just not enjoyable for me, because it's full of glitches. And then especially when we got none of the DLC, it just pissed me off to the point where I didn't want to play your game anymore. It's late. It's you know, you're almost a year and a half too late. But better late than never, and I hope the product is finally sorted, because it's absolutely despicable. But before I get into some more of the dire stuff, I just want to comment, I don't often like to push specific products. However, if you are into RPGs in any type, particularly JRPGs, and you haven't gone out and picked up No Kuni, Wrath of the White Witch, buy it. Even if you're a bit interested, you quite like RPGs, you don't really know, buy it. Seriously, it is the most charming and delightful, and just, it's a lovely smiley face. It's animated by the guys who did My Neighbor Totoro, and it's got that kind of lovely, happy, cute, it's just lovely, it's whimsical, and it's fun, and it's great. And incidentally, if anyone ever tells you, the voice, if you play the game in English, the voice of Drippy the Fairy, okay, he's Welsh. That's Welsh. Not Scottish, it's Welsh. He's Welsh. Okay? That is a Welsh accent. Get that right. I've seen countless reviews that talk about the funny Scottish man. He's Welsh. But anyway, interested in JRPGs, pick it up. Be wary though, if you're interested in the Wizard Edition, which is pretty much sold out everywhere. I was lucky, and after I bought the game, I found that GameStop UK had some, and they were selling them at cost. They were selling them at retail price. So I bought one. So I may well have a copy to resell at some point when I get this Wizards Edition. Which is good because it comes with no online pass, which is nice. There's no bullshitty day one DLC. If you buy the Wizard Edition, you can get a golden skin for 2 of your little familiars. It's kind of like a mix between Pokemon and older Final Fantasy games. You know, your battle system is based on swapping out different little monsters that you create, and you can feed them and customize their attributes with different things, change their affinity for you, stuff like that. It's a nice, lovely, in-depth game. It's even got a bit of puzzle solving where you're kind of taking out emotions from the heart of one person and putting them into another to solve puzzles, to allow you to get to different places and get rewards. It's a really, really wonderful game. Really, highly recommend it. It's high quality, really is. I can't find fault in it so far. It's one of my favourite games in a very long time. And I tend to like the sort of dark stuff and the violent and the dramatic. This is just a nice light change for me. And it just puts a smile on my face. It really does. The whole game is just charming as hell and satisfying to play. So, if you're in any way interested in RPGs, or anyway interested in anime, just pick this game up. You will not be disappointed. Genuinely, one of the best things I've played in ages. Right, now, going on to stuff that's slightly more disappointing and frustrating with the industry. Before I go on to a couple of the legal issues, I want to cover Capcom. Capcom being Capcom, because Capcom are Capcom. I'm satisfied that, in a way, partly happy, partly satisfied that Capcom, that they have released very silently a patch for DmC that is meant to deal with some of the issues. Now, I do want to say that the developers did call this and say, what's wrong? There's nothing wrong with this game. They've now fixed what they consider that people have said is wrong. You can spam certain attacks. The things people have said, they don't like it and they didn't want to buy it because of these reasons. They look like they're going to be patching some of those reasons. Now, people who are boycotting this game are not going to buy the game because they've patched it. But if you bought it and you're a bit disappointed with the way that it's so easy to spam a triple S based on certain combats, they're meant to have fixed that in the patch. I haven't seen yet how effective that patch fix has been, but I have heard a lot of people talk about it and talk about what it is meant to cover. So you are getting a patch, so the game is not complete. What's to fix, as Tamim from Ninja Theory said, those things are what's to fix. The things that your fans came back to you and said, oh, this is a bit of a pain because you fixed this, and you turned around and said there's nothing wrong with your game. Well, lo and behold, mate, there's stuff wrong with your game. Right, but speaking of Capcom, Resident Evil. Now, Resident Evil 6 depends on your view on the game, but if you are a long-time fan of Resident Evil, it's not you're going to say it's not a Resident Evil game. I'm going to say it's not a Resident Evil game. I've only played it a wee bit, and I just keep giving up on it. I mean, I try and play Chris's campaign like I would play Resident Evil 4 or 5 if I had a human being controlling Sheva, and it's too much. It's too much like Gears of War. It is a poor Gears of War clone. It feels like a poor Gears of War clone to me, rather than a Resident Evil game. And I think they accept they're going in the wrong directions because reviewers and people bashed it. Now, people who like the game, it is not a poor quality game. It is not a broken game. It's just not what I wanted. It's not what a lot of people wanted, and that's why people are angry with it. It's not because the game's bad. It's just not. They're making a more generic kind of game out of a well-renowned IP, rather than stepping the IP up to the next logical progression and make it a better game. So Capcom appear to be realising how bad their reputation is, and they appear to start trying to address things. However, their bullshit is still there. They are desperately trying to bail out their sinking ship. I'll give you a quote here from Kawata with regards to Resident Evil. He did an interview with Eurogamer, and he's basically said that Capcom will be using, just reading this from here, upcoming console remake for the 3DS of Retribution as a sounding board for the future of the franchise. Now, I'll talk about that more in a second, but I'm just going to read what he had to say. Once we see Revelations released on consoles, we'll be looking very carefully at how the title is received and what feedback we get. I think we'll get a lot of input from the fan base and the media on what it means for Resident Evil and what it could mean for the future of the series. We'll definitely be looking at that for a signpost of what we're going to do next. So, he also can say, moving forward, I can see us focusing even more on the horror aspect and fear in the series, and see us making something scarier than we have already. Okay, so that is positive. If you're a Resident Evil fan, that is some good news that they are looking to turn Resident Evil back to something more of a horror game, because Resident Evil 6 is not a horror game. It is a gruesome shooter, gruesome fantasy shooter. That's what it is. It's not really a horror game. But the problem with this is Revelations. I haven't played Revelations on the 3DS. I haven't picked it up. Then when I heard rumours about it coming to console, I thought, well, I won't pick it up on the 3DS, and I'll wait and see, and I probably will pick it up. If it's going to be good, and it's going to be a decent port, I'll probably support it and buy it. I don't like buying Capcom products, but I could be tempted if it's because what I say, it's a proper Resident Evil game. Hoping the port is a proper high quality port, not just some horrible polished. Because if they're just polishing the 3DS version and bunging it on the system, and it's going to be some horrible, horrible port, people aren't going to want to buy it. What annoys me about this is the fact that he said, oh, it's a sound. You're doing market research by releasing a game, and then if it's not well received, you're not going to continue doing that kind of thing in the series. You know exactly what fans of the series want. They want survival horror. They want scarce ammo, they want scary monsters, they want claustrophobic environments, they want to feel their character is under threat and they've got to run away from stuff, not duck behind cover and headshot people. That's not what they want out of that game. So, you know, you are going about it the right way by putting Revelations on the console. I think that's good news. I am very cautious of how you're doing it, though. I'm very cautious that what you're actually doing is trying to blackmail us into buying Revelations. By saying, if you want a Resident Evil game like that, then buy it. When really what you should be doing is developing a high quality survival horror product, because that's what we want. Do we want to buy your port from a 3DS game? People will probably buy it because they want a survival horror 3D game. They don't necessarily want a polished up 3DS game. They might want a next generation survival horror. Not the closest thing to a last generation survival horror. I mean, Resident Evil 4, that was the PS2. 5 and 6 didn't progress the series. It only went downhill. So, you know, it's a mixture of good and bad news on that, really. I hope the game's good, because if it's a shitty port and no one buys it, there's going to be problems. There's going to be problems, and the series is going to die. I mean, a lot of people always consider the series dead anyway. But on to other things. Bit of good news, sort of from a political standpoint, with regards to the rights of used games and digital consumers. Now, the Valve terms of service that restrict reselling of products from Steam is being contested by a German consumer rights group. They may well sue. They are very close, it seems, to suing Valve, because although they're going back on some of their restrictions in their next terms of service, their current terms of service are too strict and they pretty much hamper resale, and they're trying to set a precedent for resale of digital content. This is something we need to take very great care to do. And this is something that people should be doing more of. Challenge these terms of service. They're not law. They've just told you this is what we're giving you for this. You can contest it. The same way that if, as I've been holding off on this whole used game thing with Sony and everything, but if they announce with their port, if they mention in any way with the specs of the announcement for their PlayStation 4, RF tagging or anything like that, this is where we need to start action if you want to fight for the rights of people to own their products. I don't care whether you buy used or not. I don't really buy used. I buy games new. I buy them day one. I'm not doing it because I can't afford it. There are people who can't afford it and they have to do that. I don't have to do that, but I don't see why their rights should be hampered because I don't have to resort to that. They deserve support. It's right. It's our rights. These are our basic rights. If you want to give them up to be a fanboy, you need to look in the mirror and see what are your priorities. You can't possibly think it's right to put your own self-interest of getting hold of a game as more important than your fundamental rights. No, you can't be doing that. You can't do that. That's insane. One last topic I want to cover is it's come to my attention that there's continual that the flagging of copyrighted material is continuing on and on and on and on. And there's people, they're just being flagged left, right and bloody centre for copyright. For all kinds of games, particularly Capcom, do it more than anyone else. You know, but there's been cases of Max Payne 3, there's been cases, you know, it's ridiculous. It is ridiculous. It really is. Things like Twitch TV, things like esports, things like Let's Plays. Industry, you need to realise this is promotion. This is promoting your product. If there's 50,000 videos of people playing a certain game, that shows people who are not really swayed by the game how many people are playing it and how much they love it. And you know what? The experience of watching someone play a game and playing a game are not the same thing. That is why people get confused. Not even the gaming industry seems to understand this. Showing a movie on YouTube and showing gameplay on YouTube are two totally different legal things. They should be. Totally different legal aspects. The film, all it is watching. All the film is. If I could see the film for free, I wouldn't buy the film for money. That's of course, that's sense. That's perfect sense. Everyone who's watched a film that's been streamed on YouTube and doesn't buy the film, yeah, that's damaging their sales. If I watch someone playing a game and I see them having a great time playing it and like how it looks like to play, I want to play it. I don't want to watch it. It's not a spectator experience. The only thing that's a spectator experience is tournament play. Is watching people play tournaments in StarCraft or in Dota or in in Call of Duty or in Street Fighter or or Mortal Kombat. That is spectator sport. Competitive play is spectator sport. Watching a campaign and watching someone comment on a campaign, that doesn't harm your sales. That is free advertising. You have to put these things in perspective. Realise that the gaming community are generally on your side. There'll be people who will speak up against your bullshit when they see you being bullshitty. There will be. I'll be one of them. There's lots of them out there. But that's a minority. Honestly, I can speak from my own interest. I talk about these things because I care about gaming. I care about the industry. And if you're in the industry and you profit from the industry, then me giving a shit should really matter to you. Everyone who cares should be important to you. Think on that. Anyway, it's for those of you who aren't in Europe and aren't really aware of rugby, it's the Six Nations tournament's kicked off today. And I'm off to go watch England play Wales. Sorry, England play Wales? Wales are playing Ireland. England play Scotland this afternoon, so that's why I'm enjoying a nice wine before I go out. I'm going to have a nice time out with my brother. Enjoy some sport. And neglect No Kuni because, although I love that game, do you know what? It can wait. It can wait. I love it. It's a great game. But it's still going to be there when I come back. Anyway, take care of yourself, guys.